Florence was a city of whispers and secrets, ruled not by kings, but by bankers. And these bankers, the Medici, had a secret weapon far more powerful than any army. They did not just build an empire of gold, they built an empire of images. They commissioned masterpieces that were more than just pretty pictures. They were carefully crafted messages, silent shouts of power, piety, and absolute dominance. Want to know how a family of merchants became uncrowned kings, all by painting their way to power? Get ready to uncover the shocking truth behind Florence's most famous art. Number 10, Donatello's David. Step into the private courtyard of the Palazzo Medici in Florence around the mid-1400s. There, bathed in sunlight, stood a bronze statue unlike anything Florence had seen in 1,000 years. It was Donatello's David, a young boy, completely nude, with a mischievous smile playing on his lips and a giant severed head at his feet. This was not just a pretty piece of art, it was a loud, clear whisper from Cosimo de' Medici, the shrewd patriarch who truly began the family's ascent to power. The very choice of David as a subject was a statement. For centuries, Florence had seen itself as a new David, a small but spirited republic, constantly battling larger, more powerful enemies. The story of David, a young shepherd boy who triumphs over the mighty Goliath through cunning and divine favor, resonated deeply with the Florentine spirit. By commissioning this iconic figure, Cosimo was subtly aligning his family with the very soul of the city. He presented the Medici not as ambitious oligarchs, but as the true defenders of Florence, embodying its virtues and guaranteeing its triumphs. The statue showed David after his victory, standing confidently with his foot on Goliath's head. This image suggested that, under Medici guidance, Florence too would always overcome its oppressors, whether external enemies or internal rivals. But Donatello's David was also a powerful symbol of the Medici's commitment to the new ideas sweeping across Italy, the revival of classical antiquity. For centuries, statues had been mostly clothed, focused on Christian themes. And Donatello's David, however, was fully nude, a direct reference to the heroic nudity of ancient Greek and Roman sculpture. This was groundbreaking for its time and signaled that the Medici were at the forefront of this cultural rebirth known as the Renaissance. By embracing and patronizing such bold, classical art, Cosimo was showcasing the Medici family as sophisticated, cultured, and intellectually advanced. They were not just rich bankersy, they were patrons of a new golden age, bringing back the glories of the past. This message would have been particularly strong for the intellectual elite and foreign dignitaries visiting the palazzo. The placement of the statue was also key. It was not in a public square initially, but in the private courtyard of the Palazzo Medici. This choice meant that while it might not have been seen by every citizen every day, it was visible to important visitors and to those who entered the heart of the Medici household. These visitors would have understood the layers of meaning embedded in the artwork. They would have seen the Medici as proud inheritors of classical wisdom and as guardians of Florentine liberty. The intimacy of its setting made the message even more potent, as if the Medici were sharing a private, profound truth about their family and their city. The subtle details of the sculpture added to its propaganda impact. David's youthful, almost effeminate appearance, combined with his determined gaze on the large sword, suggested that true strength did not come from brute force, but from intelligence, skill, and divine will. This interpretation served the Medici well, as they often preferred to operate through subtle influence and economic power rather than overt military might. They presented themselves as the clever, divinely blessed leaders who guided Florence to prosperity, much like David guided the Israelites to victory. The smooth, polished bronze surface itself would have glimmered, reflecting light and drawing the eye, emphasizing the new aesthetic tastes championed by the Medici. This artwork became an emblem of their cultural leadership, a silent testament to their vision for Florence and their own crucial role within it. The statue, therefore, was not merely a decorative piece, it was a carefully constructed visual argument for Medici power, piety, and cultural supremacy, all wrapped in the beautiful, groundbreaking form of a Renaissance masterpiece. Number 9, Michelozo's Palazzo Medici Riccardi. Imagine walking through the bustling streets of Florence in the mid-15th century. Most houses were modest, built for practicality. Then you turn onto Via Larga, one of the city's widest streets, and you see it a massive, imposing palace of stone, stretching for an entire block. This was the Palazzo Medici, designed by Michelozzo and built for Cosimo de' Medici starting in 1444. This building was not just a home for the Medici family, it was a colossal piece of propaganda, a physical manifestation of their power, wealth, and careful public image. Cosimo de' Medici was known for his calculated humility. He preferred to project an image of a modest citizen, a first among equals, rather than an overt ruler. According to historical accounts, he even rejected an initial, more extravagant design for his palace, fearing it would provoke jealousy from other Florentine families. Yet the Palazzo Medici, even with its restrained design, was anything but small. It was the largest private residence built in Florence at the time, a grand statement of wealth and influence that cleverly hid its immense scale behind a facade of civic responsibility. This massive structure instantly communicated that the Medici were not just wealthy, they were the wealthiest family in Florence, capable of undertaking such an enormous project without batting an eye. The palace's design itself was a masterclass in visual communication. It featured a rusticated stone exterior, meaning the stone blocks on the lower levels were left rough and unfinished, giving the impression of immense strength and impregnability, almost like a fortress. This message was softened as the building rose. The middle floor used smoother, more finely cut stone, and the top floor featured highly refined, polished stone. This progression from rough to smooth suggested a journey from sturdy foundations to refined sophistication, reflecting the Medici's own journey from merchant origins to cultural leadership. The rough lower level also served a practical purpose, providing a sense of protection and solidity in a turbulent political environment. But the Palazzo Medici was more than just a private residence, it was a hub of civic and cultural activity. The prominent street-level benches built into the exterior walls were a public gesture, offering a place for citizens to sit and rest. This seemingly small detail projected an image of the Medici as benefactors of the community, caring for the well-being of the Florentine people. The grand courtyard within the palace, visible from the street through the main entrance, was often used for public ceremonies, weddings, and even art exhibitions. This semi-public space allowed the Medici to showcase their patronage of the arts and their lavish lifestyle while still maintaining an air of accessibility. It invited people in, creating a sense of shared prosperity and cultural richness, all stemming from the Medici's influence. The palace housed not only the family's living quarters, but also their vast library, art collections, and offices. It served as the operational headquarters for their banking empire and a meeting place for politicians, diplomats, and artists. Foreign visitors and local dignitaries alike would have been ushered through its grand halls, witnessing firsthand the sheer scale of Medici wealth and their sophisticated taste. The architecture itself, with its classical elements and harmonious proportions, quietly asserted the Medici's understanding of and patronage for the new Renaissance style, placing them at the forefront of cultural innovation. The sheer size and enduring presence of the Palazzo Medici, a landmark for centuries, constantly reminded everyone of the family's foundational role in shaping Florence and their enduring power, all without ever needing to explicitly state it. It was a silent, monumental testament to the Medici's understated dominance and their vision for Florence. Number 8. Chapel of the Magi, Palazzo Medici. Hidden within the stately walls of the Palazzo Medici, a private chapel unfolds a spectacular visual narrative, the Chapel of the Magi, frescoed by Benuzzo Gozzoli between 1459 and 1461. This small, intimate space reserved for family and important guests was a glittering display of Medici piety, wealth, and political savvy, all wrapped up in a sacred story. It was not just a place of worship, it was a carefully constructed piece of propaganda designed to elevate the Medici family's standing in Florence and beyond. The central theme of the frescoes is the procession of the Magi, depicting the journey of the three kings to Bethlehem to adore the Christ child. This was a popular religious theme in Florence, particularly important to the confraternity of the Magi, a powerful religious brotherhood that many prominent Florentine citizens, including members of the Medici family, belonged to. By choosing this narrative, Piero the Goody, Cosimo's son, and the patron of the chapel, immediately aligned the Medici with deep religious devotion. The Magi, traditionally seen as wise, wealthy, and politically powerful figures who followed a divine star, became direct stand-ins for the Medici themselves. But Gazzoli's frescoes were far from a simple religious depiction. They were a lavish parade of contemporary Florentine society filled with recognizable portraits of the Medici family and their allies. The procession itself is led by a young king, often identified as a youthful Lorenzo the Magnificent riding a magnificent white horse. Behind him are portraits of Piero the Goody, Cosimo the Elder, and various other family members, all depicted as participants in this holy journey. This was a powerful visual statement. The Medici were not just pious, they were divinely guided, their leadership mirroring the wisdom of the Magi. Their earthly journey, their political endeavors, and their spiritual path were all intertwined with this sacred narrative. The sheer opulence of the frescoes spoke volumes about Medici wealth. The figures wear magnificent jewel-encrusted robes, intricate patterns, and rich fabrics that would have been incredibly expensive to produce. The landscape teems with exotic animals, cheetahs, camels, and falcons, suggesting the Medici's vast international trading network and their ability to acquire rare and luxurious goods from distant lands. The detailed scenery, filled with castles and landscapes, further suggested the Medici's extensive reach and the bounty of the world they controlled. Every element, from the gold leaf used for halos and adornments to the meticulously rendered details of clothing and foliage, screamed of immense wealth and lavish taste, all dedicated to the glory of God and, by extension, the glory of the Medici family. Beyond family portraits, the frescoes also included recognizable figures from important political allies and contemporary dignitaries. Pope Pius II, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick III, and the Patriarch of Constantinople were all depicted, subtly suggesting the Medici's extensive network of political connections and their influence on the international stage. This visual assembly of powerful figures affirmed the Medici's importance in both secular and ecclesiastical spheres. The chapel, therefore, was not merely a personal devotional space, it was a microcosm of the Medici's world, presenting them as devout, wealthy, wise, and powerfully connected leaders whose path was divinely ordained. For any guest entering this chapel, the message would have been clear: the Medici family was destined for greatness, and their rule was blessed. Number 7. Botticelli's Adoration of the Magi. In the year 1475, a remarkable painting by Sandro Botticelli was unveiled in the church of Santa Maria Novella in Florence. Titled The Adoration of the Magi, it was commissioned by a Florentine banker named Giovanni di Zanobi del Mazzo. However, this painting became a profound piece of propaganda for the Medici family, despite not being directly commissioned by the primary Medici branch. It was a visual celebration of their power, their piety, and their integration into the very history of Florence, all through the clever insertion of family portraits into a sacred scene. The painting depicts the traditional biblical scene of the three kings kneeling before the infant Jesus, offering their gifts. But instead of generic, idealized figures for the Magi and their retinue, Botticelli filled the canvas with recognizable faces from the most powerful family in Florence. Cosimo the Elder, the patriarch who truly established Medici power, is prominently positioned, kneeling at the feet of the Virgin Mary, his face filled with reverence. His sons Piero the Goody and Giovanni di Cosimo de' Medici are also depicted, kneeling respectfully nearby. Then their sons, Lorenzo the Magnificent and his brother Giuliano, appear among the retinue, standing tall and proud, gazing out at the viewer. This was an audacious move, effectively inserting the Medici family into the biblical narrative, placing them as wise, pious, and revered figures who were present at one of Christianity's most pivotal moments. The message conveyed by these portraits was multi-layered. First, it reinforced the Medici's image as deeply religious and devout individuals. By depicting them in an act of profound adoration, it subtly suggested that their immense wealth and power were not just earthly achievements, but were blessed by God. They were not merely bankers, they were pious leaders who humbled themselves before divine authority, setting a moral example for the city. Second, and perhaps even more powerfully, it legitimized their political power. By placing Cosimo, the de facto ruler of Florence, as one of the wise men, it implied that his wisdom and leadership were divinely inspired, just like the Magi who followed a star. It connected the Medici's earthly authority to a heavenly mandate. The painting also served to visually unite the Medici family, presenting a lineage of power and influence. The presence of Cosimo and his sons, along with Lorenzo and Giuliano, showed a continuity of leadership across generations. This was important in a city where political power was often contested. The painting proclaimed that the Medici were a stable, enduring force in Florence, a family whose wisdom and importance spanned decades. For the viewer in the church, this would have been a powerful reminder of who truly guided the city's destiny. Furthermore, the sheer artistic quality of Botticelli's work spoke to the Medici's patronage of the arts. Even if the commission was technically from another patron, the fact that Botticelli, one of Florence's leading artists, chose to immortalize the Medici in such a prominent way in a public church underscored their pervasive influence and their role as cultural trendsetters. The meticulous detail, vibrant colors, and dynamic composition showcased the brilliance of Florentine art, which was inextricably linked to Medici support. Even Botticelli himself appears in the painting, looking directly out at the viewer from the far right, acknowledging the powerful figures he has portrayed. The adoration of the Magi was a visual testament to the Medici's piety, their divine favor, their generational power, and their undeniable status as the true guiding lights of Florence, all subtly woven into a beautiful religious narrative. Number 6, Raphael's Pope Leo X with cardinals Giulio de' Medici and Luigi de' Rossi. In the opulent chambers of the Vatican around 1518, Raphael painted a portrait that was far more than a mere likeness. It was a calculated assertion of Medici power at the highest echelons of the church. This masterpiece, Pope Leo X with cardinals Giulio de' Medici and Luigi de' Rossi, served as a powerful piece of propaganda for the Medici family, proclaiming their unrivaled authority, intellectualism, and dynastic reach. The central figure is Pope Leo X, born Giovanni de' Medici, son of Lorenzo the Magnificent. He sits at a table, dressed in lavish papal robes of crimson velvet and silk, his face intelligent and contemplative. His gaze is direct, yet his expression is nuanced, suggesting a man of great learning and refined taste. He holds a magnifying glass, seemingly examining an illuminated manuscript, while a beautiful ornate bell rests on the table beside him. These details are not accidental. They project an image of Leo X as a scholar, a patron of the arts, and a connoisseur of beauty. This intellectual sophistication was a key part of the Medici brand, portraying them as leaders not just through wealth or force, but through wisdom and cultured discernment. Crucially, Leo X is not alone in the portrait. Flanking him are two cardinals, both members of the Medici family. On his left stands Cardinal Giulio de' Medici, his cousin, who would later become Pope Clement VII. On his right is Cardinal Luigi de' Rossi, his nephew. Their presence in the portrait is paramount to its propaganda message. It immediately highlights the pervasive influence of the Medici family within the highest ranks of the Catholic Church. This was not just one Medici holding the papacy, it was a clear demonstration of a dynastic grip on religious power, showing a network of loyal, powerful family members positioned to continue the family's legacy. The red robes of the cardinals mirror the popes, visually reinforcing their shared lineage and their collective authority. The composition of the painting carefully arranges the figures to emphasize this family unity and hierarchical power. Leo X is at the center, dominant and imposing, but the two cardinals are close, integral to his sphere of influence. Their proximity underscores the idea that the Pope's power is supported and reinforced by his family. This was especially important in a time when the papacy was a political as well as a spiritual office, and family ties were crucial for maintaining stability and control. The portrait visually proclaimed that the Medici were not a fleeting presence in Rome, they were deeply entrenched, a force to be reckoned with for generations. The luxurious setting and the meticulous detail of the painting also served to underscore the Medici's immense wealth and status. The rich fabrics, the polished wood of the table, the finely bound books, and the glimmering brass bell all spoke of immense riches and a refined aesthetic. Raphael's masterful technique, his ability to render textures and expressions with such lifelike precision, further elevated the painting's prestige and, by extension, the prestige of the family it depicted. This portrait was displayed for all to see in a prominent location, sending an unmistakable message to ambassadors, rulers, and visiting dignitaries. The Medici were at the helm of the church, powerful, intelligent, and backed by an unbreakable family bond, ready to guide both spiritual and temporal affairs with wisdom and authority. Number 5. Bronzino's Cosimo I de' Medici in armor. Around 1545, the painter Agnolo Bronzino created a series of portraits of Cosimo I de' Medici, Duke of Florence, that went far beyond capturing a mere likeness. His Cosimo I de' Medici in armor is a potent piece of propaganda designed to project an image of unwavering authority, military might, and the unshakable legitimacy of Medici rule in Tuscany. This portrait was not just art, it was a declaration of power by a ruler who had clawed his way to absolute control. Cosimo I, a distant cousin who unexpectedly inherited the ducal title in 1537, faced immense challenges to his authority. Florence had a long history as a republic, and many longed for its return. To solidify his new position as Duke, Cosimo needed to visually demonstrate his strength, his resolve, and his right to rule. Bronzino's portrait served this purpose perfectly. Cosimo is depicted in gleaming dark armor, his hand resting firmly on the hilt of his sword. This choice of attire immediately conveys a message of military prowess and readiness for battle. It shows him as a protector of his state, a military commander prepared to defend Florence and maintain order, even by force if necessary. The armor itself is not just a costume, it is an impenetrable shell, mirroring the Duke's own seemingly unyielding resolve. The focus of the portrait is entirely on Cosimo himself. There is no background, no distracting details of a lavish setting. This darkness concentrates all attention on the Duke's face and posture. His expression is stern, unsmiling, and intensely serious. His gaze is direct, cold, and unwavering, conveying a sense of absolute control and an iron will. This stoic demeanor, a hallmark of many of Bronzino's portraits of Cosimo, was a deliberate choice. It projected an image of a ruler who was not swayed by emotion, but governed by reason and absolute resolve. This was a man of action, a leader who commanded respect through sheer force of personality and an unyielding grip on power. For those who might have questioned his legitimacy, this portrait was a stern visual warning of his unyielding authority. The portrait also subtly speaks to Cosimo's transformation of the Medici family's image. While earlier, Medici patriarchs like Cosimo the Elder and Lorenzo the Magnificent had projected an image of civic-minded bankers and cultural patrons, Cosimo I was establishing a new identity, that of a sovereign ruler, a duke with absolute power. The armor was a clear break from the scholarly robes or merchant attire of his ancestors. It signaled a new era for Florence, one under firm centralized ducal rule. The portrait declared that Florence was now a duchy, and Cosimo was its undisputed, formidable leader. Multiple versions of this portrait exist, suggesting that it was widely disseminated among courts and within Florence, further amplifying its propaganda effect. Each copy served as a reminder of Cosimo's strength and his commitment to his role as Duke. It was a constant visual reinforcement of his authority, silently informing everyone that he was the rightful, powerful ruler of Tuscany. Bronzino's Cosimo I de' Medici in armor stands as a testament to how art could be wielded as a sharp political tool, shaping public perception and consolidating power through the deliberate construction of a ruler's image. Number 4. Giorgio Vasari's Uffizi. In the heart of Florence, stretching along the Arno River, stands a monumental building complex known today as the Uffizi Gallery. But when construction began in 1560, under the ambitious patronage of Cosimo I de' Medici and designed by Giorgio Vasari, it was conceived not as an art museum but as a groundbreaking piece of architectural propaganda, the Uffizi meaning offices. This massive structure was a physical manifestation of Cosimo's centralized power, his vision for modern governance, and the immense authority he wielded as Duke of Florence and Grand Duke of Tuscany. After securing his position as Duke, Cosimo I set about transforming Florence from a republic into a ducal state. He needed a place to consolidate all the government offices, magistracies, and guilds that had previously been scattered across the city. The Uffizi was his solution. It was a single, imposing building, U-shaped, designed to house all these administrative functions under one roof. This centralization was a clear visual statement of Cosimo's absolute control. No longer would the various organs of government operate independently. They would all be overseen from a single, grand edifice, reflecting the Duke's unified command over the state. The architecture itself, with its long, symmetrical wings and rhythmic repetition of columns, conveyed a sense of order, efficiency, and rational administration, all hallmarks of Cosimo's authoritarian rule. The Uffizi's prime location, adjacent to the Palazzo della Signoria, the former civic center, now Palazzo Vecchio, where Cosimo had moved his ducal residence and overlooking the Arno, amplified its propaganda effect. It literally connected the seat of ducal power to the administrative heart of the state. This physical proximity symbolized the seamless integration of Cosimo's personal rule with the machinery of government. The building's grandeur, with its Doric columns, wide portico, and long galleries, was designed to impress. Any citizen or foreign visitor entering the Uffizi would be immediately struck by its monumental scale and sophisticated design, understanding that such an undertaking could only be achieved by a ruler of immense wealth and power. It proclaimed that Florence, under Medici leadership, was a modern, well-organized capital capable of grand civic projects. Perhaps the most potent element of the Uffizi's propaganda was the Vasari corridor. This elevated, enclosed walkway built by Vasari in just 5 months connected the Uffizi directly to the Palazzo Vecchio, and then, astonishingly, across the Arno River over the Ponte Vecchio, and finally to the Duke's new residence at the Palazzo Pitti. This secret passage allowed Cosimo to move privately and securely between his palace, his administrative offices, and his private residence, without ever touching the public streets. The Vasari corridor was a literal, physical manifestation of the Duke's detachment from the populace and his elevated position above them. It was a powerful symbol of his absolute control, his ability to transcend the public realm, and his ultimate authority over every aspect of Florentine life. This architectural marvel was not just convenient, it was a constant, unspoken declaration of Cosimo's pervasive and unchallengeable power, making the Uffizi complex an enduring testament to his vision of absolute rule. Number 3, Benvenuto Cellini's Perseus with the head of Medusa. In the Loggia dei Lanzi, an open-air public arcade in the Piazza della Signoria, Florence, stands a bronze masterpiece by Benvenuto Cellini, Perseus with the head of Medusa. Unveiled in 1554, this sculpture was not merely A stunning example of Renaissance artistry, it was a potent and highly visible piece of propaganda, commissioned by Cosimo I de' Medici, designed to intimidate his enemies and solidify his ducal power in the very heart of Florence. The Piazza della Signoria had long been a political hotspot, a stage for Florentine republicanism. Historically, it was where Michelangelo's David and Donatello's Judith and Holofernes stood, symbols of civic liberty and the overthrow of tyranny. Cosimo I, who had just crushed a republican revolt and established himself as duke, needed to reframe the public narrative of this space. Cellini's Perseus was his answer. The story of Perseus, who slays the monstrous Medusa by looking at her reflection in his shield and then presents her severed head, was ripe with symbolic meaning for Cosimo's rule. Perseus, often seen as a hero who overcomes evil and chaos, was a direct stand-in for Cosimo himself. Medusa, whose gaze turned men to stone, represented the chaos, republican rebellions, and factionalism that Cosimo claimed to have vanquished. By depicting Perseus holding Medusa's severed head aloft, Cosimo was visually proclaiming his triumph over the forces that threatened his rule and the stability of Florence. The message was clear. Cosimo was the strong, divinely blessed leader who had brought order out of chaos, justice to a turbulent city, and protection to its citizens. For any Florentine who might still harbor republican sentiments, the statue was a chilling warning opposed the Duke, and he would meet a similar fate, turned to stone by his unflinching justice. Cellini's technical mastery added to the propaganda's impact. The creation of Perseus was notoriously difficult, requiring a single, enormous bronze casting. The statue is intricately detailed, from the hero's perfectly sculpted body to the writhing snakes on Medusa's head. The sheer complexity and successful execution of such a monumental work showcased not only Cellini's genius, but also Cosimo's wealth, his ambition, and his ability to command the greatest artists of his time. This artistic feat served as a testament to the new Duke's grand vision and his resources, reinforcing his image as a powerful and sophisticated patron. The prominent placement of Perseus in the Loggia dei Lanzi, directly facing the Palazzo della Signoria Cosimo's ducal residence, ensured maximum visibility and impact. It was positioned to be seen by all who entered the piazza, serving as a constant public reminder of Cosimo's authority. The dramatic pose of Perseus, victorious and resolute, combined with the gruesome realism of Medusa's head, created an undeniable visual statement. Perseus, with the head of Medusa, was not just a beautiful sculpture, it was a fierce political declaration, a public warning, and a powerful symbol of Cosimo I de' Medici's iron grip on Florence and his determination to maintain order through strength. Number 2. Bartolomeo Ammanati's Fountain of Neptune. Standing proudly in the Piazza della Signoria in Florence, almost overshadowing the Palazzo Vecchio, is the colossal Fountain of Neptune designed by Bartolomeo Ammanati and completed in 1574. This grand public monument, commissioned by Cosimo I de' Medici, was far more than a source of fresh water for the city. It was a monumental piece of propaganda, a visual declaration of Medici ambition, their growing naval power, and their self-proclaimed role as rulers of both land and sea. Cosimo I, having consolidated his power over Florence and Tuscany, harbored grander ambitions. He sought to transform Tuscany into a maritime power, establishing a formidable navy and expanding trade routes across the Mediterranean. The choice of Neptune, the Roman god of the sea, as the central figure for a major public fountain was a direct, unmistakable symbol of these aspirations. Neptune, majestic and powerful, standing atop his chariot pulled by 4 horses emerging from the water, represented Cosimo's dominion over the Tuscan coastline and his vision of a powerful Medici fleet. The fountain proclaimed that Florence, under Medici rule, was not just a landlocked city, but a burgeoning naval force, ready to command the seas and expand its influence. The sheer scale of the fountain itself contributed to its propaganda effect. Neptune is a colossal marble figure surrounded by an array of bronze figures, nymphs, satyrs, and sea creatures. The use of white marble, which stood in stark contrast to the dark bronzes of Cellini's Perseus nearby, made the fountain a striking and highly visible landmark. Such a massive and intricate undertaking required immense financial resources and sophisticated engineering. The fountain thus became a testament to Cosimo's unparalleled wealth and his ability to commission and execute large-scale public works that beautified the city while simultaneously broadcasting his power. It asserted that the Medici possessed the means to transform Florence into a truly grand capital. The abundant flow of water from the fountain carried its own symbolic weight. The water, a source of life and prosperity, pouring forth ceaselessly, suggested the bounty and well-being that Cosimo's rule brought to Florence. It implied that under his leadership the city would flourish, its resources would be limitless, and its future would be bright. This visual metaphor of prosperity and provision was particularly effective for the general populace, subtly linking their daily comfort to the benevolence and power of the Duke. Despite initial criticism from some Florentines who mockingly called the statue Biancone Big Whitey, due to its size and early lack of artistic acclaim, the Fountain of Neptune solidified its place as a permanent fixture in the Piazza della Signoria. Its position directly opposite the Palazzo Vecchio, the seat of ducal power, constantly reinforced its message. Every citizen and visitor entering the main square would see this monumental display, consciously or subconsciously absorbing the message of Medici control over land, resources, and sea. The Fountain of Neptune was a public declaration of the Medici's expanding ambitions, their immense wealth, and their absolute authority over the very elements, all brought to life through a magnificent public spectacle. Number 1. The Chapel of the Princes, San Lorenzo. And deep within the Basilica of San Lorenzo in Florence, a monumental octagonal structure gleams with an otherworldly luminescence, adorned with an unimaginable array of precious stones. This is the Chapel of the Princes, the mausoleum of the Medici Grand Dukes of Tuscany, a project begun in 1604 under Ferdinando I de' Medici and continued for centuries by his successors. It is the ultimate piece of Medici propaganda, a breathtaking and extravagant statement designed to cement their eternal glory, their dynastic power, and their sacred lineage beyond the grave. The Chapel of the Princes was conceived as a permanent and lavish resting place for the Medici Grand Dukes and their consorts. Unlike earlier Medici tombs, which were often more modest or integrated into existing church structures, this chapel was designed as a freestanding, independent testament to the family's enduring power. Its colossal scale, with a towering dome, immediately signals its importance. The octagonal plan, reminiscent of classical mausoleums, evokes a sense of timelessness and imperial grandeur, linking the Medici to the great dynasties of antiquity. The most striking feature of the chapel is its incredibly lavish decoration. The entire interior is covered in a dazzling mosaic of semi-precious stones, a technique known as pietra dure. The walls are paneled with lapis lazuli, oriental alabaster, jasper, agate, and mother of pearl, meticulously cut and inlaid to create intricate patterns and heraldic crests. These materials were incredibly expensive, sourced from all corners of the world, and their use in such an overwhelming quantity was a direct display of the Medici's astronomical wealth. Every surface radiates opulence, literally encrusting the space with their riches. This was not merely beautiful, it was a physical manifestation of their boundless financial power, proving that their wealth was beyond the reach of any other family or state. The 6 massive sarcophagi, designed to hold the remains of the Grand Dukes, line the walls, each one a work of art in itself. Above them are niches intended for bronze statues of the Grand Dukes, further emphasizing their individual importance while also highlighting the continuity of the dynastic line. Though not all the statues were completed, the intention was clear to create an unbroken visual lineage of powerful rulers, asserting their right to hereditary rule for generations to come. The Chapel of the Princes was a grand statement that the Medici were not a passing phenomenon. They were a permanent fixture, their legacy enshrined in stone and precious minerals for eternity. The chapel's location within the Basilica of San Lorenzo, a church long associated with the Medici family, as their parish church and a repository for earlier family tombs, also carried significant propaganda weight. It linked the Grand Dukes directly to the spiritual authority of the church and to the historical continuity of their ancestors. This connection reinforced their image as pious rulers whose power was divinely sanctioned, creating a powerful blend of temporal and spiritual authority. The Chapel of the Princes was a project of immense ambition, taking centuries to build and consuming vast resources. It was a physical commitment to their legacy, a monumental declaration that the Medici were here to stay, their glory everlasting, their power cemented in a mausoleum of unparalleled splendor. It stands as the ultimate enduring symbol of the Medici's use of art to craft an image of unchallenged eternal dominance.